I'll tell you a story that still makes people in my valley laugh whenever it comes up, though at the time it was anything but funny for me. I'd gone up to the mountains that winter for one simple reason: peace. You know, the kind of quiet where you can hear snow falling, where the crunch of your own boots is the loudest sound for miles, where solitude feels like a gift. That's what I wanted. But what I woke up to one morning was the complete opposite. Instead of birds or wind or the creak of the cabin wood, I heard the grinding of metal on timber, like somebody was dragging a steel gate across concrete. It was so out of place, so harsh against the silence, that I jumped out of bed with my heart racing. I pulled on my coat and stepped out into the bitter cold, and what I saw honestly made me laugh, not out of humor, but disbelief. Parked sideways across my wooden gate was a shiny black SUV, nose shoved into a snowbank, rear bumper sticking into the road like a flag of conquest. And standing beside it was a woman in a fur-lined coat, brushing snow off her shoulders with this casual arrogance, like she'd just claimed the land for herself. Before I could even get a word in, she turned and said, without a greeting, "I'll just be here a few hours." As if that settled everything. I told her straight. It was my property, my only entrance, and she needed to move. She gave me this smirk, pulled down her sunglasses, and said, "Cute. No one owns the mountains." Now, I've lived up here long enough to know that line is code for, "I don't respect your boundaries." I wanted to argue, but I also noticed the state of her car. No proper chains on the tires, undercarriage already icing up, and I thought, if she leaves it here overnight, this mountain will swallow it whole. When I told her again to move it, she waved her hand and said, "Relax. It's not like you're going anywhere." And here's the thing, she wasn't wrong. I had coffee brewing, firewood stacked, and no plans to leave. But it wasn't about convenience. It was about principle. The only gate to my home was barricaded by someone who thought her car was a crown. So I gave her one last warning, and she pulled her hood tight and shot back. "I'll be back by evening. Don't touch it." Then she just trudged away down the road, leaving her Mercedes blocking my life like a dare. Now, the mountain teaches patience. Avalanches don't care if you're late. Snowstorms don't adjust for your plans. And I've learned patience too. But patience doesn't mean weakness. So I went into the shed, ran my hand along the cold steel of my snow groomer, the machine we call the Beast, wide tracks and a blade sharp as a grin, and I thought to myself, "Lady, you have no idea what you've started." Word travels fast in a valley. By the time I stopped at the lodge for coffee supplies the next day, old Tom behind the counter already knew. "Heard some city gal blocked your gate with her fancy car," he said, grinning like he'd just heard the punchline of a joke. The whole table of locals was buzzing about it, placing bets on how long I'd put up with her nonsense. Everyone around here knows the type, city folks who treat the mountains like a backdrop for their selfies, convinced the rules don't apply to them. But even they weren't ready for how far this woman was willing to push. By the second day, she was back, with reinforcements. 2 men in thin city jackets, stomping their cold feet, looking like they wanted no part of this. She pointed at the gate, at me, and declared like a general, "See? He can't even leave. He's trapped. What's the big deal?" One of the guys muttered something about maybe moving the car, but she silenced him quick. Then, to really twist it, she told me she'd already called the sheriff, on me, claiming I was harassing her. When the sheriff rolled up later that afternoon, half the valley had gathered, pretending to chop wood or walk their dogs just to watch. The woman launched into her performance, screaming about intimidation, how she was just a visitor, how I was hostile. The sheriff let her rant, then looked at me. I handed him my deed papers. He flipped through, nodded once, and said flatly, "This is his land. That gate isn't public." You should have seen her face. It went from smug to furious in a heartbeat. She demanded he tow my gate. The locals behind the trees nearly choked, holding back laughter. But she didn't stop. Pride's a dangerous fuel. Instead of moving her car, she doubled down. The next morning, there were not one, not two, but 3 SUVs across my gate, like a blockade of glossy arrogance. And that was the moment I realized. She wasn't just being stubborn, she was making it a battle, a test of wills. And I knew something she didn't. The mountain doesn't lose those. So I did the one thing she didn't expect. I waited. I mounted trail cameras, documented everything. Time, weather, photos, her every insult. I pulled the snow groomer out of the shed, let it idle just long enough for her to hear that diesel growl rolling across the slope, and parked it where it could be seen. A beast waiting, red and hulking against the snow. When she spotted it, her laugh caught for the first time. Just for a second, but I saw the crack. Days went on like this, her shouting, me recording, the locals treating it like theater. They even started giving it a name, Snowcat Justice. One guy joked about selling tickets, another swore it was better than TV. But under all the laughter, there was this buzz, this tension, everyone waiting to see when I'd finally end it. That morning, the air was sharp, the kind of cold that makes trees snap. I woke before dawn, stepped outside, and looked at that row of frozen SUVs. Her Mercedes was half buried now, snow crusting over it like the mountain was already reclaiming it. I walked to the groomer, pulled off the tarp, turned the key, and when that engine roared alive, it was like the whole valley held its breath. She came running up the road just in time to see it, screaming about lawsuits, insurance, threats, calling me a coward, waving her arms like she could order me to stop. But the mountain had waited long enough, and so had I. I eased the throttle, and the beast crawled forward, slow, unstoppable. The blade touched snow, then steel. The bumper crumpled like cardboard. Glass shattered in diamonds across the white. Metal groaned. And then, with a sickening crunch, her proud Mercedes collapsed under the weight, flattened into a heap of twisted pride. The locals erupted, cheering, laughing, whistling like it was the 4th of July. She, on the other hand, fell to her knees in the snow, screaming at the wreck like she could will it back to life. The sheriff showed up minutes later, stepped out, whistled low, and shook his head. "Well," he said, "I guess the obstruction's been cleared." She demanded my arrest, but he just reminded her she'd been warned, that she'd chosen this outcome herself. He even muttered to me, just loud enough, "No jury in this county will blame you." In the days after, the story exploded. Locals posted the footage online. Memes flew everywhere. People called it Snowcat 1, Mercedes 0. Her insurance refused to pay, her lawyers wouldn't touch the case, and everywhere she went, whispers followed. Around here, they even gave her a nickname, Snowcat Pancake. It stuck harder than any lawsuit ever could. For me, life went back to normal. The silence returned. The fire crackled, the gate stood free, and the mountain was mine again. But sometimes, when I sit on the porch with my coffee and look at the groomer parked by the shed, I think about that week, about how close I came to losing my patience. And I realize, it wasn't about revenge. It was about balance. Because out here, silence isn't weakness. Patience isn't surrender. And when pushed too far, even the quietest man can roar louder than steel. Now, I'll leave you with this. Was I right to do what I did, or should I have handled it differently? Was crushing that car justice, or just pride answering pride? I've made my peace with it, but I want to hear yours. Drop a comment, share this story, tell me what you think about mountain justice, because sometimes the line between dignity and vengeance is thinner than snow on a gate.